Welcome. My name is Rich Reed, and I'm the director of the Southwest Harbor Public Library. I'm so glad you could join us. For those of you in the area, we have our holiday book sale going on, a hooked rug exhibit, and we have two raffles, one of the coveted gallon of Holly Masterson caught scallops, and another from a Judy Taylor art print of Echo Lake. We look forward to the upcoming January 10th event, a collaborative approach to climate change planning for MDI's tourism industry. We're partnering with A Climate to Thrive, Jessup Library, and Northeast Harbor Library in this hybrid event. We're recording this event and it'll be available on the library's YouTube channel in a few days. Sarah's talk will take near 45 minutes or so, and we'll have a question and answer period afterwards. Tonight's event is a program leading to the Camden conference with the theme of global trade and politics, managing turbulence, and it will meet in Camden on February 17th through 19th. We are so pleased to have with us tonight Sarah Curran, the Deputy Director, Climate Planning and Community Partnerships with the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and Future. In this role, she leads climate policy planning and climate-related programs to support Maine communities. She has a master's degree in community planning and development from the Muskie School of Public Service at the University of Southern Maine. Please warmly welcome Sarah Curran.
Hey, welcome. Come on in. Okay. I'm just going to minimize this. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for having me here tonight. My name is Sarah Curran. I'm Deputy Director with the Governor's Office of Policy, Innovation, and the Future. And I'm excited to provide an update on Maine Won't Wait, the state's 4-year climate action plan. And I'm also going to talk about the Community Resilience Partnership, which is a new program that we launched to provide support for local community climate and energy action. On October 1st, 2020, the Maine Climate Council delivered Maine Won't Wait, the state's 4-year climate action plan, to Governor Mills and the legislature. And Maine has a couple of key climate goals that I want to highlight briefly. The first are our emission reduction targets, which are in statute: 45% below 1990 levels by 2030 and 80% below 1990 levels by 2050. The governor has also signed into law our goal to achieve state carbon neutrality by 2045. And then the Climate Council and the Climate Plan also have a goal to ensure that Maine people, industries, and communities are resilient to the impacts of climate change. This slide summarizes the sources of Maine greenhouse gas emissions from the DEP 9th Biennial Greenhouse Gas Emissions Report. And what you see here is that about 2/3 of Maine emissions are from the transportation and the building sector. So just want to highlight the importance of reducing emissions in those sectors. The Climate Council that delivered the Climate Action Report is a 39-member council. It includes scientists, industry leaders, local officials, and there were about 200+ people who participated in the Climate Council and the working groups over an 18-month process to develop the Climate Action Plan. In addition to the 6 working groups, there was an expert scientific and technical subcommittee, and the plan also established an equity subcommittee, and the equity subcommittee is focused on ensuring the implementation of the Climate Action Plan is equitable, and that all climate strategies ensure benefits across diverse populations in Maine, recognizing that, like other dislocations and disruptions, climate impacts those who are most vulnerable the most. Climate Plan drew on 4 baseline reports that I wanted to just summarize briefly. The first is a scientific assessment of climate change, and that was led by the Scientific Technical Subcommittee. And their work sort of catalogs the different impacts of climate change in Maine. There's also a cost-benefit analysis and greenhouse gas modeling that was done. And so the The cost benefit analysis looked at the different strategies under consideration and what they would achieve. There was also a cost of doing nothing analysis that was part of the work, and the cost of doing nothing analysis looked at the impacts, the financial and economic impacts of climate impacts in Maine. And so, for example, they look at the impacts of sea level rise on coastal jobs, on tourism. They looked at flood risk and inland flood risk. And so that report, the cost of doing nothing, looked at what will happen if we don't take action to stop climate change. There was an equity assessment of the strategies under consideration that was led by the Mitchell Center at the University of Maine. And then finally, there was also a report on the economic opportunities of the clean energy economy. So as Maine transitions to renewable energy, what the job and economic opportunities are there. So the plan has 4 goals, and I'll provide links to the plan in case folks want to take a look at it. But the 4 goals are to reduce Maine's greenhouse gas emissions, to make Maine more resilient to the impacts of climate change, to foster economic opportunity and prosperity, and to advance equity through Maine's climate response. And then there are 8 climate actions in the plan, and I'm just going to touch briefly on each of these in the next several slides. The first strategy is around embracing the future of transportation. And so this strategy includes transitioning to electric vehicles and a focus on charging infrastructure to support that transition. It includes increasing fuel efficiency and alternative fuels, and then also reducing vehicle miles traveled. So this is through strategies like expanding access to broadband and encouraging development in places where people can walk to school and work and shopping, as well as active transportation. So investing in the infrastructure to support bicycle and pedestrian movement. Strategy B in the climate action plan is around modernizing Maine's buildings and reducing emissions. So transitioning to cleaner heating and cooling systems and more efficient appliances, including heat pumps, accelerating efficiency improvements, so weatherizing buildings, advancing the design and construction of new buildings, including climate-friendly building materials that sequester carbon, and then leading by example in public buildings. So opportunities for state and local government to make improvements to their buildings to reduce emissions. Strategy C is about reducing emissions in the energy and industrial sectors with clean energy investments. And Maine has increased its renewable portfolio standard for electricity. We have goals for 80% by 2030 and 100% by 2050, and we are currently on track to meet that goal. And so that is about the percentage of generation of renewable energy generation. Strategy D is around growing Maine's energy economy. And so this includes both the economic opportunities from the clean energy transition, so renewable energy, building improvements, job opportunities there, as well as protecting our natural resource industries, so fishing, farming, and forestry from climate impacts, and embracing some of the new market opportunities there around local food and forest products. The governor has set a goal to double clean energy jobs in Maine, and so that would be from about 15,000 to about 30,000 jobs by 2030. Strategy E in Maine's climate action plan is protecting the environment and working lands to promote natural climate solutions and increase carbon sequestration. Maine is about 90% forested, and so there's a real opportunity to sequester carbon in our forests and our working lands, and there's also an opportunity in our ocean called blue carbon. So thinking about the protection of the environment and sequestering carbon, as well as the co-benefits that come along with those strategies. And then strategy F is about supporting healthy and resilient communities. So this is supporting community efforts to understand and plan for climate impacts around adopting sea level rise projections and providing land use planning and tools for communities to use, as well as strengthening public health education and prevention about climate impacts. Strategy F is about climate-ready infrastructure, so recognizing that we're already seeing climate impacts, more frequent storms, sea level rise, big water volumes inland, and helping communities to make their infrastructure climate-ready so that those impacts, so that when we experience those impacts, it has less devastating effects. And this is just an example from 2021 of significant climate impacts from the more heavier volume storm events that we're now seeing. And then strategy H, the final strategy in the plan, is about engaging with Maine people and communities. So making sure that people understand how climate is impacting their community and that they are aware of the programs and opportunities that they can participate in to take action. I do want to highlight the planning process that we went through to develop Maine Won't Wait. As I mentioned, more than 200 people participated. We had 6 working groups and subcommittees, a lot of people working really hard to develop the strategies, to provide feedback. We had thousands of Maine people provide feedback on the strategies as we were developing them. And we were recently awarded an award from the American Planning Association for Maine Won't Wait, recognizing the importance of the plan and the process and the value of planning and policy in climate action. December 1st was the 2-year anniversary of the plan. And so we have a progress report that's available on our website that tracks against the recommendation and highlights where we're making progress. We've also launched a dashboard where folks can explore the different metrics in the plan and look at where we're making progress, for example, on public EV charging investment and heat pumps. The governor set a goal to install 100,000 heat pumps by 2025, and we're well on pace there. So the dashboard is a chance to sort of look at the metrics and look at the data and see for yourself how we're doing on Maine's climate action plan. I'm going to walk briefly through some of the examples from the dashboard to show you what some of this data looks like. This is the opening page of the dashboard where you can look at a map and you can see, for example, where different projects are taking place around the state. So one of the more exciting in the last month was the electric school bus announcement from EPA. Maine competed in 134 electric school buses in communities across the state. And so you can see school bus icons on this map. And so with this map, what you can do is sort of toggle on and off the different layers, and you can explore the different strategies and the progress that we're making. The dashboard also highlights the progress that we're making on our emissions reductions. We are 25% below the 1990 greenhouse gas emissions as of 2019, and 75% on the way to carbon neutral. And then the graph on the right shows the distribution of carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuel combustion. And that was the same numbers that we saw earlier with the 49% in transportation and 21% in residential. We've really accelerated EV charging employment in the state, recognizing that it's really important for people to know that they'll be able to charge when they're traveling if they're going to invest in an EV. And so the state has invested a lot in public EV charging, and we're excited about some increased federal funds that are supporting that deployment as well. EV vehicles are growing in Maine. There's more electric vehicles on the road every year. And again, more federal opportunities coming, particularly some consumer incentives coming through the Investment Reduction Act. And I'll talk about that, Inflation Reduction Act. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later in the presentation. This is a slide highlighting those 34 EV school buses. That was really a lot of effort on the part of the Department of Education and the local school districts, and Maine competed really, really well in this national competition for electric school buses. We're also doing really well in heat pump deployment. So the nice thing about heat pumps is they save people money as well as reducing emissions. And so the governor, as I mentioned, has set a goal to have 100,000 heat pumps, and we are well on our way to that goal. We also have a particular focus on installing heat pumps in low-income households. And again, also excited for some coming Inflation Reduction Act incentives in that area as well. Heat pump deployment is happening all over the state, which is really exciting. We're seeing it in rural areas in northern Maine. Across the state, people are installing heat pumps. We're also on pace for weatherization. So in addition to transitioning to heat pumps and other energy efficiency measures, it's really important. Maine has some of the oldest housing stock in the nation. And so thinking about weatherization and making people's homes more comfortable and more efficient is really important as well. Again, part of that buildings strategy that I talked about earlier. Accelerating the pace of clean energy deployment. So we have the goal to get to 80% renewable energy, and we are doing great with solar installation. We're on track to meet our renewable portfolio standard goal, and we're going to have to just keep increasing the contributions of clean energy to meet that target, the 80% by 2030. That, as I mentioned, also comes with job opportunity and economic opportunity. So we have a goal of doubling Maine's clean energy jobs. And in particular, these are opportunities in clean electricity and grid and storage jobs. So we see a lot of opportunity across the state for the clean energy jobs. And the Governor's Energy Office has recently launched an initiative called the Clean Energy Partnership, which is focused on workforce development and partnering with industry and educational institutions to develop a workforce for that sector in particular. We're also making good progress on Maine's conserve plan. So again, land conservation helps protect those natural and working lands, the forests and farms that help us sequester carbon and meet our carbon neutrality goal, as well as providing lots of co-benefits like recreation and wildlife and clean water. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the Community Resilience Partnership. So the Climate Action Plan was really specific in the need to support communities to take climate action. And we were excited to launch the Community Resilience Partnership 1 year ago on December 1st. And the purpose of the partnership is to provide grants and technical assistance to communities in Maine around reducing emissions, transitioning to clean energy, and becoming more resilient to climate impacts. These two maps were both in the Climate Action Plan. The map on the left demonstrates the challenge of planning capacity in many Maine communities. So a lot of towns don't have a planner on staff, may not have access to a regional planner. And so capacity is definitely a challenge that we hear from our communities around taking climate action. And then the map on the right is around social vulnerability. And so that's a map that looks at a number of different demographic and socioeconomic factors. You know, does your town have a lot of older people? Are there low income residents? Factors that would make it harder for a community to bounce back and be resilient to any number of impacts. And so the combination of these two things helped to inform the development of the partnership. We now have more than 100 Maine communities, and this map shows the distribution of grants all over the state. We have 127 communities participating in the program. 76 are fully enrolled. Another 51 are working with service providers to enroll in the program. And we just announced our most recent grant round on December 1 with grants to communities to take action and then to service providers to help them get started. And as I was mentioning, these are grants to communities around climate action across the state. So these are some recent site visits we've been doing to go out and hear from communities how things are going and the great work that they're doing in their towns. I want to spend just a little bit of time going over the structure of the partnership because I think it's a really good opportunity to support communities taking action. So I want to just spend a couple minutes on it. The partnership is funded with $4.75 million from the biennial budget. And as I was mentioning, the purpose is to provide grants to communities to reduce emissions, transition to clean energy, and prepare for climate impacts. And there are two different types of funding opportunities. We provide grants directly to communities, and that can be for action and for planning around climate and energy. And then we also provide grants to service providers, and those are organizations and nonprofits, regional planning organizations, and others to help communities get started, recognizing again that capacity challenge can be a real barrier for a lot of communities. Are some steps to take to enroll in the partnership, and this is what the service provider grants are for. So if a community needs help taking these steps, we have grants to service providers to help them. But the steps are to pass a municipal resolution committing to participate in the program, to complete 2 self-assessments to sort of look at where you are as a community and what's important to you, to hold a community workshop and set some priorities, and then submit your enrollment materials. So once you're enrolled, you are eligible for the community action grants. Community action grants are grants of up to $50,000 per community or $125,000 for multi-community collaborations. And we have a list of 72 actions that takes the state climate action plan and brings it down to the local level and provides suggestions for activities that communities could undertake. And these are no match grants if you work off the list of 72 actions. And we did 2 grant rounds last year. I also want to emphasize the technical assistance that's available through the program. So again, we do grants to service providers to help communities through that enrollment process, to help them identify what they have done and what their priorities are, and enroll in the partnership and submit their first grant application. And we encourage those service providers, especially to work with small communities and communities that have higher social vulnerability. And we encourage them to work with groups of communities. And then we also have a pilot program with regional coordinators. So once communities are enrolled in the program and they've identified their list of priorities and maybe they've gotten their first $50,000 grant, they might want to keep going. And so we've established regional coordinator capacity to help communities continue to seek funding for their climate and energy priorities. At the end of year 1 of the program, we have 128 now participating communities with 77 fully enrolled. We've given out 74 community action grants for a total of 3.6 million, and then other grants to 24 service providers to help 82 communities with that enrollment and prioritization and grant application process. And then, as I mentioned, we have the 4 regional coordinators. So it's been a very exciting year. Just wanted to give you a little bit of some of the project examples of what we're seeing from communities. And so we're seeing applications from communities for everything from climate resilience activities, emissions reductions activities, and combinations. So communities doing solar projects, putting in heat pumps, doing energy audits and looking at energy efficiency. A lot of projects around electric vehicles and EV charging and complete streets. A lot of communities doing climate action planning, so really taking that next step in terms of setting their priorities and doing a local climate action plan. Communities looking at natural systems and nature-based solutions, communities looking at their drinking water supply and other infrastructure, several communities looking at vulnerable infrastructure and also vulnerable populations, who in our community is going to be most vulnerable to climate impacts and how do we take steps to support them. And then several projects around outreach and engagement and helping the whole community get involved. I also wanted to highlight we have a new website for the Climate Action Plan that features case studies and stories and examples of climate action that communities are taking that a lot of folks have said is really helpful in terms of helping them see some opportunities for action in the plan. And then the last thing I want to highlight tonight is some of the federal resources that are coming that we see significant alignment with around Maine Won't Wait. And so the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan is Governor Mills' plan for the American Rescue funds, about $1 billion that came to the state around recovery, economic recovery from COVID. And the plan from the governor includes business supports, it includes jobs and career programs, and it also includes investments in people and communities. And so you see a lot of overlap here with some of the climate priorities, including clean energy, education, apprenticeships, and developing that clean energy economy, as well as significantly in infrastructure. So broadband, clean water, energy efficiency, and housing. So all lots of areas of overlap with the Climate Action Plan. And so we're really excited about the alignment with Maine's Climate Action Plan and some of the federal resources that came in through the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan. We're about a year into the Maine Jobs and Recovery Plan, and there is a website that you can go to sort of track progress and see where projects have been completed, and that's at maine.gov/jobsplan. There's also now federal investment under the bipartisan infrastructure law. And so these are significant federal resources that are becoming available to support infrastructure investment. And again, a lot of alignment with Maine's climate and energy priorities. There's a new website for the BIL, maine.gov/BIL. And we are understanding these BIL investments in 4 categories. The first is transportation. And so a lot of overlap here with the Climate Action Plan around infrastructure for EVs and pedestrian and active transportation infrastructure, also resilience and environmental protection. So thinking about those climate impacts and how we make our infrastructure more resilient to those, drinking water and culverts and things like that. There's investments in energy programs and building energy efficiency coming through the bipartisan infrastructure law, and then also in broadband. And broadband is one of the strategies in the Climate Action Plan that helps to reduce vehicle miles traveled. And then finally, there's the new Inflation Reduction Act. And there's going to be significant tax incentives and funding for innovation and financing and other climate and energy opportunities. So we're really excited about the opportunities this will present for individuals and households, as well as for communities in Maine. And so that's new legislation that it's still coming out, and we're learning more about the details, but a lot of alignment with Maine Won't Wait. And so that is what I had to share for slides tonight. I'm happy to take questions about the Climate Action Plan or the Community Resilience Partnership. And thank you for having me. If I stop sharing. There we go. And then how do I see? I was going to go. There we go. Oh, and there are questions in the chat. Okay. Okay. Great. Any questions from anyone that I can answer about the Climate Action Plan or the partnership? I think, I mean, there are steps you can take it. Sorry, I'll repeat the question just in case everybody didn't hear. The question was, as an individual, what steps can you take? And certainly there are things you can do at the household level. So investing in energy efficiency in your home, thinking about how you can save yourself money and make your home more comfortable and also reduce emissions. So those are important steps. There's transportation choices you can make around driving less or, using broadband. There are investments you can make in electric vehicles and things like that. So there's sort of scaling that can be done in terms of what an individual is comfortable and able to do. There's also a lot of work that can be done at the community level. And so I think thinking about who in your community is going to be impacted by climate and what steps you as a community can be taking to help prepare for climate impacts, and thinking about who's vulnerable and think about how you might support them in some of the situations that we're experiencing now. We've had communities who've looked at, for example, who's going to be vulnerable to high heat days. And a lot of times it's your older seniors, or who's going to be vulnerable in increasing storm events, things like that. So I think there are steps you can take as an individual, but I think it's also really powerful to feel like you're a part of a community taking action. And there are great examples of sort of grassroots action right here where we are with A Climate to Thrive and the work they're doing with communities to support grassroots action. And then the community partnership is a great way to get involved. If you can support your community to enroll in the partnership and get access to some of that grant funding to support your community taking action. Thanks for the question. What related actions are taking place on MDI? Wow, there's a lot of things happening on MDI. So there are actions happening around EV charging. There's actions happening around energy efficiency and renewable energy development, around vulnerability of infrastructure and individuals and community members. There's really neat crosstown collaboration happening between Bar Harbor and MDI and Tremont, working together to look at climate impacts. So I think I believe there's a sustainability or a climate task force in all three communities. And so I'd encourage you to connect with the folks who are doing that work. Oh, and Brian was just reminding me, and the ambassadors program. There's a new program that just did some education and training with, I believe, 18 individuals who it offered an opportunity to learn more about climate impacts and opportunities to take action and how to do it right here in this community.
And then also putting in the chat right now on January 10th.
Great.
Yeah, we have a program that's collaborative approach to climate change and tourism industry.
Great. So as if folks couldn't hear, there's another program coming up on January 10th, specifically about climate change and MDI. So that will be another good one to attend. Yeah.
And has there been sort of has there been sort of political support across the aisle within Maine for any of these initiatives?
Yeah, so the Climate Council was established with bipartisan support. The funding for the community partnership was supported across political spectrums. I think when you're talking about local climate impacts, it becomes much less political. And I think a lot of people are very supportive of local climate action planning, even if there are still disagreements at the federal and state policy level. So we've had great support for the partnership program, but there's a lot of co-benefits from a lot of the climate actions that are recommended in the climate action plan. And so if you think about taking steps to help low-income residents reduce their heat expenses, be more comfortable, weatherize their homes, I mean, those are all very positive things that I think people can get behind for lots of good reasons, not just the emissions reductions. Thanks for the question. Any other questions? Okay, thank you all.
Yeah, thank you everybody for joining their event. Thank you, Sarah, so much. This is pretty inspiring to see how much that's going on in the state and how much progress that we've been making. And I hope you all have a good night.